Welcome to the Maasto Fitness podcast. Today in episode 11, we're going to talk about sodium needs for racers and how they can help reduce cramping. So this is a quick hit podcast. We keep them short and to the point, focusing on the things you can do off the bike to race faster and safer. At Maasto Fitness, we work with racers remotely in the real world. Many have a life full of commitments and don't have a lot of time to train off the bike or ride. We provide training off the bike, so days on the bike, whether riding or racing, are faster and safer. Now, this is week 3 of a 3-week little mini series we did on the hydration, and this is the final episode of it. So if you have not listened to the last 2 episodes, go back and listen to episodes 9 and 10, as this builds off of those 2, all about hydration. And like I said, 2 weeks ago, we talked specifically about just general hydration needs, how to fuel for different types of races in terms of hydration, your sweat rate, and how that all comes into play to making sure you stay hydrated for any discipline of racing. And then last week, we talked about how sports drinks come into play, the components of a sports drink, why a sports drink is important, and how to make sure you're getting the best sports drink for yourself. Now, this week, we are talking specifically about sodium. Sodium needs for racers, how it comes into play, and how it can help you. Now, sodium can be a source of cramping. I'll say that right off the bat. It can be a source of cramping, but it is not the end-all be-all of cramping that I have seen and some talk about. Keep in mind that about 95% of cramps come from dehydration. So dehydration is a huge factor with having a muscle cramp or any type of cramp on you. It is not all about having the right amount of sodium or enough sodium. It oftentimes comes from dehydration. So making sure you're properly hydrated first when you have a cramp. Then if you're still having cramps, you can dive into a little bit more of the sodium needs side. Now, I've kind of the last 2 weeks have talked about hydration needs are super individualized. You need to make sure you know your sweat rate to know how much fluid you need to replace that you're losing through sweat. Then I talked about sports drinks, and you need to make sure you have a sports drink that works for you. There's a ton of factors with sports drinks, and you need to make sure you're having the right one for you. Now, finally, week 3, once again, sodium needs are different for every athlete, and we're going to dive into that. And you need to make sure you have the right sodium needs for you. So we're going to talk a little bit about what sodium's role is in hydration, how you can figure out what type of sodium needs you have and how to apply them. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the products you can use to help get in enough sodium. So we'll go ahead and jump into it here. So like I said in last week's podcast, sports drinks have minerals in them: sodium, calcium, potassium. They're vital to the functions of the body. And they have 2 main functions in a sports drink: help the body absorb the fluid and help with muscle function, help those muscles contract, help make sure that we can move our muscles the way we want to. Now, the big one with sodium is helping the body absorb the fluid that we're giving it. So we'll go ahead and jump a little deeper into it. Sodium is the main electrolyte found in your blood. It aids in the absorption of nutrients in your gut, maintaining cognitive function, nerve impulse transmission, and muscle contraction. But from a racer's point of view, at least, let's say the most critical function it plays is helping maintain a fluid balance in your body. So I like to always say salt makes the water stick. Simple as that. Salt helps our body absorb the water. We can think about it like that when we're out there racing in all types of conditions or training, hot or cold. We need that water to stick. We need to get that water from our stomach to our body. So when you go to the bathroom or you sweat, you lose sodium from your body. And because the body can't maintain sodium or store it beyond a certain point, you need to consume it every day to keep your levels topped off. Sweating is the main way that racers lose fluid during exercise. So that's the number one way we're going to lose fluid, and we're losing that sodium as well. Now, the thing is, everyone loses a different level of sodium from their sweat. You can lose as little as 200 milligrams of sodium per liter of sweat, or as much as 2,000 milligrams of sodium per liter of sweat. And everyone sweats at a different rate, which means your sodium loss can be as much as 10 times more than the person next to you on the starting line before you take off. So like I kind of said starting off, Hydration needs individualized. Sports drink, in terms of what you like and what works for you, individualized. Sodium needs, super individualized. So in a lot of cases, those sodium losses, can be a lot higher or a lot lower than someone else. And if you're an athlete, which we are, we're racers, we're more than likely losing more than the average person. So if you look at, like, for example, our government standard guidelines, they recommend 2,300 milligrams of sodium for one person for a day. That's what they recommend for a whole day. Now, that's not taking into account someone who's an athlete, who's a racer, which is what we are. And in theory, we could lose that 2,300 milligrams in an hour, 90 minutes of exercise, depending on our sweat rate and our sodium needs. So if you're a heavy sweater, you could lose that daily recommended value in an hour. So that's why when we're racing and training hard, we need to supplement with sodium. So when you flip over any sports drink, any mixed bag, and look at the label, you'll see oftentimes the sodium content of that is 25-40% of the total daily needs, because when we're exercising and training, we're losing a lot of sodium and we need to replace it. Now, like I said, it's very individualized, and we'll go a little deeper into ways that you can dive into that and figure out what's best for you. But first, I'll say there's a couple telltale signs you can do to figure out if you're a salty sweater. When you get done riding or racing or doing training off the bike, take a look at your face, your arms, and your clothing. Does it look a little crusty, a little sweaty? I know for me, for example, like kind of like between like my helmet and goggle line, I'll kind of have like a white strip that's like literally a little bit crusty looking from me losing that salty sweat. So I know, for example, I'm a fairly salty sweater. So just taking a look at your gear can help give you an idea of how salty of a sweater you are. If you're seeing that, you're probably a little bit on the higher end of the spectrum, possibly not down at 200, but maybe over 1,000, we could say. That's really, really general, but you're definitely closer to the top than the bottom in terms of your sodium needs. Now, another way you can do this is through testing. And there's two ways you can do testing, which is really cool. So the first, going to a lab and having a sodium test done, which I've had done. And essentially, it's really easy. You sit in a chair, they put a little thing on your arm, you feel like a couple little kind of like really light electrical feelings. And what they're doing is just drawing some sweat out of you. They put it in an analyzer, and through that, figure out your sodium needs. And the cool thing is, physiologically, your sodium needs in general pretty much stay the same your whole life. From everything I've learned and been told and through other experts in the field, sodium needs pretty much stay the same. So you get this test done once, you pretty much have your sodium needs for life. Now, the other thing you can do is you can buy the Gatorade Sweat Patch, which forever only worked with Apple devices, and I'm an Android guy, so I never got to use it, but now they have an Android app, so it's kind of open to everyone. But it's a patch you wear on your arm. You train, ride, race for an hour, whatever, preferably at a pretty good intensity. So you're sweating a bit and getting an idea of how much sodium you're losing during that hour during rigorous activity. And then you have the app on your phone, scan the little patch, and it tells you what your sodium needs are. And I found for me and some of our other coaches that it was pretty consistent to the lab results. So I would say it's a good product to do. So you can either go to a testing center, which I'll put a link in the description here of places you can find those, or you can grab the Gatorade Sweat Patch kit from Gatorade and basically get the same results as well. And the cool thing is about that Gatorade Sweat Patch, I think they give you 2 for each one. So you could do 2 tests, like one in the spring, one in the summer, and make sure they're still lining up for you and you're getting good, accurate results. Now, so with sodium and understanding your sodium needs, you need to read the labels on your sports drink to understand what you're getting. Like I said, it's a huge range, and it can be very individualized for each person. And there's no way to know exactly how much you need without testing through either that lab testing or the Gatorade Sweat Patch. So if you don't have access to those, I would say giving yourself kind of a once over and looking and seeing where you're sitting. Now, if you're not getting any cramping at all, and you're staying properly hydrated, you're probably not far off. If you're running into cramping, well, it's definitely time to dig deeper and start figuring out what is going on. And that may call for some lab testing. So flip those labels over, flip those bottles over on the sports drinks you're having, and take a look at the label and read, how much sodium is this having? How much sodium am I having? And then compare it. If you're trying different sports drinks on different days or different brands, keep an eye on that sodium and see what your total intake is and see if you're feeling any different. And I know this is hard to do. It's very subjective because there's a lot of things coming into when we ride and race, life stress, other things going on, how you slept, the food you ate. There's a million different factors, but try to be a little subjective. Take the data from different times, sports drinks you're having, and just a little bit of note keeping can really help you zone in on your needs depending on what you had and what you saw on yourself afterwards. So now let's say you have a higher need for sodium than maybe what a sports drink calls. Well, I will say there's lots of sports drinks brands out there, and I would look into a different brand. One brand that you can do a custom blend with is Infinite. Infinite's really good sports drink. So if you're finding you have needs that you think or that data has told you are outside of what your sports drink is currently having, Infinite is a good way to go, or Carbo Rocket. They have custom blends. Also, there are other supplements you can have, like electrolyte supplements you can add into your mix. But with all of those, I think it's important to remember that if you have high blood pressure, hypertension, always make sure you consult with a doctor. Don't just go off on a whim and mess around with this stuff. Make sure you're doing it the right and most healthy way. And speaking of that, at Maasto Fitness, we have a registered dietitian who specializes in endurance sports. So if you're looking to really dial in all these needs, your hydration needs, your nutrition needs, make sure you're getting the right amount of sodium, the right amount of fluid, send me a message and I'll connect you with her. And you guys can have a chat and see what you can do together to help you get this all dialed in. So I know we kind of went pretty deep there on sodium, but it's a big player in endurance sports. And we're out there, we're working hard. We're using every muscle in our body, and we've got a high heart rate while we control this machine for whatever the duration may be, 10 minutes, an hour, 3 hours, 24 hours. Sodium is a big player in that. And so is this whole hydration thing. So make sure that you're really doing what's right for you. We spend a lot of time prepping our bikes, driving to races, getting ready to race, getting the bike cleaned up after the race, getting ready again. And I feel like hydration, making sure you got the right hydration, the right fluid, got the right sodium needs, you drinking the sports drink for you. These are all things that you can control. And through some testing, you can really take yourself to the next level and limit your chances of setback through these things. So make sure that you're dialing in these needs, spending some time working on them. And like I said at Maasto Fitness, this is what we do. We work with racers remotely in the real world. We've got tons of guides and documents for them to dial in all these types of things. So if you're looking for strength training, endurance training, cardiovascular training, mobility training, and you want resources to help you race at your best, send me a message. We'll hook you up with a free week to give it a try. And yeah, that's it for this week. I'll see you guys next week.